All sports are in full swing, so let's take a look around Night Nation as the teams begin their seasons. Welcome back to One More Night, a UCF podcast, one team, one heartbeat. This is Coach Wolf, and here are the five things we're going to run down today. Number one, we're going to start with women's soccer as they got underway on Thursday. Then, second, we'll switch over to the men's soccer team, and can they repeat as Sunbelt Conference champions this year? Then, third, we'll go to volleyball as they're looking to improve under the second year of Matt Botsford. And then, fourth, we'll talk about week 2 of fall football camp. And to end it all up, we'll talk about number 5, which is about number 5, Jaden Daniels from LSU. We'll give you my take on the dispute he's having with LSU about using his quote unquote his number 5. So first of all, I did not get another weekday. First week of school was extremely busy. A great week, but just so busy. I was not able to get a weekday out again. So here I am on the weekend. I'm trying to prep another show and get it out hopefully next week. I'm 2 episodes away from kind of another milestone, and I really would like to hit that next weekend, but we'll just see how the week takes me. I do have volleyball tryouts, hence the coach part of my tag here. I do have volleyball tryouts all this week, about 120 girls I will be running through to narrow down to 2 teams. So it will be a very busy week, both before and after school, and just, getting back into the swing of things. So we'll see how we do. So let's start with women's soccer, headed up by Tiffany Roberts Shahadak. And last year, the ladies finished 12-4-5, 5-1-5 in conference. They did lose in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, but they did advance in the first round of the NCAA tournament over Maine before they would lose on the road at Duke, who I believe was ranked number 2 at the time. They lost in the second round. So, they're looking to improve their depth on not only the Big 12 tournament, not getting knocked out so early there, but hopefully get a better seed and go even further this year in the NCAA tournament. Now, they started on Thursday night. That was their first home game. In their first actual game, they had a couple exhibitions, but they opened up with the Florida Gators. And I'm not 100%. I was talking to the girls yesterday at Fan Fest. I think it's 3 in a row over the Gators. One of them said it's longer than that, but I try to do some research on. I couldn't find it. So if any of you happen to know how many it's in a row the women's soccer team has beaten the Gators, please pop it in the comments or shoot me some communication. Would love to know because I was not able to find it. But at home, they opened up and they beat them again. And it was a tight one, 4-3, but a great way to get the season started. Now they're on the road this Thursday. They're going to LSU, who is ranked 16th. So it'll be a good test, good early test for the ladies there. They'll have 5 more non-conference games before they start into their Big 12 season. They'll start with opening up the Big 12 season at home versus number 23 Texas Tech. Now, they'll also play a couple of other ones at home. They'll play number 13 Colorado, but they have to go on the road against number 6 TCU and number 20 West Virginia, who are both slated to be pretty good. Also, they'll play Kansas, BYU, and Baylor, who is all those teams they have ranked over UCF in the preseason poll. So they have us finishing 8th, still making a tournament, I believe. I believe they'll still think we'll make the tournament, again this year. But we got to be a little bit more competitive. And I think the biggest thing is so many ties last year, so many close games where they just couldn't pull out the victory. I think if they can turn that tide, because they started out real hot, but then had lots of ties in conference, and I think that kind of brought their strength of schedule down a little bit. So nobody also was even on the preseason team, which I found a little bit interesting. So we'll just kind of see. TCU is the heavy favorite for the women's soccer this year, and it looks like they are going to be very tough, not only in conference, but even in the tournament as well. So that's the women's. Let's switch over. And the second thing is we'll talk about the men's soccer team, coached by Scott Calabrese. Now, they ended up last year 11-7-3, 4-3-2 in the conference, but they started really slow. It was a very slow start. We're really under 500 for a long period of time before they made it back level. And then they kind of got on a run towards the end of the season. Now, they were fifth seed going into the Sun Belt tournament, and they played four-seeded Georgia Southern, who they beat earlier at home. And it went to two overtimes, but they did get the victory and move on. And they were in Lexington, Kentucky already, but they were going to play the number one seed, Kentucky. And they lost to them early in the year, but were able to beat them to move to the final game against Marshall. Now, Marshall was the third seed, and they had played us the last game, and we had gone up to Morgantown and lost. And so we were playing in the same, at Morgantown again. So we'd already been there very recently, as far as the atmosphere. And it was extremely chippy game. Ended up watching because it was the championship game, and the men pulled it out 3-1 to win the Sun Belt Conference, which was a surprise to many people. Scott was very emotional after the game, just about how hard the guys had worked and how it was a challenging start, but they kept battling through. They'd get into the NCAA tournament. They would win their first game at home versus FAU before going on the road to a number 15 ranked Georgetown, and they would lose in the second round. So both the men and the women, faltering in the second round, but the men coming out with a Sun Belt Conference title, which was definitely a great way to end the season. Now this year, Marshall is actually picked to be first, and West Virginia is picked to be second. Marshall's preseason ranking is 17, West Virginia's 23. They do have us third, though. So they do have us being competitive within the conference. So it may come down to, those last couple. Can we get over it? But going down the rest of it, because there's just only a few teams in the Sun Belt. You have Kentucky behind us, then South Carolina, James Madison, Old Dominion, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, and then ending with Coastal Carolina. So we have a couple of players named to the preseason watch list, basically saying that the goalie of the year could be our goalie, Matisse Herbert. We have Takaharo hammering this, Fujita. He's the defending possible player of the year. We have another one that's on the basically preseason team, Jim Hewlett, and he's also a defender. So it looks like we really have a strong back line there. So hopefully we can continue that. They'll start off with their first game. They've had a couple of exhibitions. They'll start off with their first game with Boston on the 20th of October. So they're looking to get off to a better start this year for sure. And we're going to take a quick break. Kind of forgot my headphones, so I'm going to go pop those in real quick. So I got a little bit of echo, so hopefully this comes all right. And also, I'm running on Dunkin' today. Just always throw that out there. Can't wait to actually get a sponsor. But we'll take a quick break, and then we'll flip over and talk about the last couple of things on today's countdown. Okay, hopefully I didn't mess that up by not having the headphones on, but we got them on now. And if I messed it up, we'll just go back and redo that first part. But let's get into the third thing, and that is the volleyball season. Now, last year, 17-12, 8-10 in conference. That's what really hurt us last year. We were really close in a lot of conference games and kind of faltered down the end. We missed not only the Big 12 tournament, but because we missed the Big 12, we had no way to really battle into the NCAA. So no postseason berth for the women's volleyball last year. Matt Botsford in his second year is looking to change that. He's got three seniors, 5 juniors, 5 sophomore, and 4 freshmen. So a very young team, but does have a couple of returners, senior led, I believe, with Abby Shomers as the setter. You've got Ella Chapman as the middle blocker, and you have Ava Armour as the outside hitter, and also named to the preseason, basically team for the Big 12. And look for a very, very great season from Ava Armour. Their first game will be Friday, August 28th versus Robert Morris. They're hosting basically a black gold classic. Then they'll play Stony Brook before ending up with NC State. And then they basically have a month of non-conference games. They play a Wake Forest Classic where they'll play Georgetown. They'll play the host Wake Forest. They'll also play Davidson. And then they'll have a couple of home games that they're hosting versus Stetson and Virginia before going to the Stacey Clark Classic, where they'll play University of Albany and then a number 9 ranked Purdue. And that'll be a big test with the Big Ten. Big Ten's normally very challenging. That'll be a good litmus test after playing all those games. That'll be a good, you know, basically look to see how we're doing and if we can compete against a higher level team. After that, a month later, we'll start with our Big 12 home opener versus Kansas State. And then we have 3 of the ranked teams that we have to play on the road and 3 of the ranked teams that will play at home. So I think that's a pretty good split. Again, it's a challenging Big 12, but we'll play number 21 Baylor, number 18 TCU, and number 12 Arizona State on the road. Arizona State's actually favored to win this year pretty heavily, so probably hurts us that we're on the road there. But we will play at home versus number 15 Kansas, number 23 Colorado, and number 24 BYU. So I feel like we got a pretty good split on those upper teams. Again, UCF is picked 9th again to just miss the tournament because only the top 8 go in the Big 12. They have Utah knocking us out again and not making that Utah getting that eighth and final spot. And that's what happened last year. We actually had the head-to-head win. We were both 8-10. Really thought we were going to get the nod, but because of the better strength of schedule Utah had, they got the bid to the tournament as the 8th seed. So we're hoping we need to outperform and win those close ones. There was a couple times we won some that you didn't think we would win, but we lost some, in really poor fashion. So again, I think that they're a young team, but there are a nucleus of returners. I feel like they'll be very competitive. I look forward to watching them as well. It was great actually getting to talk to both Coach Botsford and Ava at the Fan Fest, because Ava actually coaches one of the girls that I will be, going through tryouts and more than likely will make my team. She was there last year. So looking forward to watching how UCF plays, but it was good, chatting up with them a little bit and hope wishing them the best for the season. So now the last thing is, or not the last thing, but the fourth thing is the football week 2 fall camp. Now, this past week, we got to hear from both Coach Grinch and Coach Cooper. Coach Grinch, really stressing the takeaways. He really feels like his defense has to improve, but the biggest thing is they have to give takeaways. Again, he gave a stat last year. If you win the turnover margin, 90% chance you can win the game. It's just better if we could do that. Even some of the ones they interviewed, Ken Talley, the edge, and also Ty Bartram, the defensive back, they both said that it's been about punching and stripping at the ball. Like, they know they may not be able to get there and intercept or tip everything. But if they get that ball or that running back gets through that hole, we've got to be swarming and we've got to be punching and grabbing and yanking at that ball. We've got to create more turnovers this year. Huge focus on the defense. The biggest thing is I'm hoping the offense will complement the defense more this year. And there's a few times the defense, had a lot on their plate, hoping that the offense can kind of take that off of them a little bit. And so after Coach Cooper talked and a lot of questions about, a lot of the competitions within there. And, I just feel like, him, and then he had Brady Wayburn, very, very uh, good interview with Brady and Ty. I thought Ty also had a great one. Not the others weren't, but I thought they were both real strong. But Brady on the offensive line, talking about, just how they're trying to get the chemistry. He actually said something kind of interesting, and he was asked about, how are you acclimating, to, the new system, all that kind of things. He says, a system, you're learning the system. And even though the guys that have been there that know the system, he says it's more about who you're playing with. And he says it's probably harder on the guys that have been here, used to kind of doing something and having to get used to, the new players that are in there, that may be tougher on them than the new players coming in, getting, used to the ones that have been there as far as their repetition. So I thought that was a very interesting take by Brady. They also did Duke Watson. I guess he had not really got many reps that day because he had been, having some lingering stuff go on. He seemed a lot caught off guard by some of the questions. Really, really got kind of stumped on a few of them. Um, I think he may have been just a little bit nervous as well. So, but I think, when we're asking questions from the media standpoint, yeah, you have to remember right now they're not wanting to give out too much information. They're also not wanting to, they want to keep that competitive edge for the guys. They don't want to sit here and say that they've kind of made some decisions. I feel like they're still evaluating players, but at the same time, I think they have an idea, but they want to create that competition. And even Scott mentioned that it's a competition. It's not you get to the first game, you got your starters, and it's over. Competition goes throughout the season, and people can rise and fall on that. So I really think about the only ones that I feel really confident about are QB1. Yes, it's Alonzo Burnett, and I feel like Lewis Carter is definitely the linebacker. Now, defensive line and defensive edges, I do think they have like a pretty good idea who the starters are, but there's been so much like nursing injuries there. So I think they're, trying to evaluate, are they healthy? Who do we have? It's kind of thinner in that part of it than it is the back half of the defense. The back seven have a lot more depth. And I just think that could be all over the place outside of Lewis Carter. And so I think that's kind of one of those things where they could be a little bit of question in there. And then the kickers, I mean, I think we have them. It's Will Stone and Baltrams from the Australian punter. I think those are the two. But even at FanFest, you have basically two punters, two kickers, two very young long snappers. I think the kicking game is going to be one of those things where we got to see what we got. Um, other outside of the punter, there's a lot of unproven, and it's got to be a good snap to him. I mean, he can't be chasing the ball all over the place and getting off, effective punts. So that one I'm going to be curious to kind of keep an eye on as well. And I think what I'm going to do is I really want to talk about some of the things at FanFest. So I'll probably do that on the next show. And that's why I really want to try to get that out during the week because I have come, at special episode coming up, and I really want to keep that to just that. And so I may try to piece it together somehow, even though it's a busy week for me, and get that out. Just tell you about FanFest, and then I'd kind of like to just talk about some of the competition within the room, why I think some things may be happening, just to give you my take. I mean, we're all going to find out here very shortly. I mean, that first game against Bethune-Cookman, we're going to see who the starters are. We're going to get to run out there and see that. I have some thoughts of why and who it could be. And then, a couple other things that, I'd be interested in is also just, when you get to that second and possibly even third, just depending on how far we're up, who's in there at some of those key positions. So if I can, I'll probably, jump back on that. But another thing I wanted to kind of touch on this week is, seeing Cole back out in actual pads. I mean, he was pretty much, in street clothes there for a while. And I actually wanted to go back, and he looked like he just gotten really like skinnier. Like, I'm sure he hasn't been working out as much. I think he tried out for the NFL, didn't make it. Yeah, I'm sure he was working out and stuff, but there's a difference between working out, being in football shape, and just working out to stay fit. He looks a little bit more lean, and I pulled up the roster, and they definitely don't have a current pitcher. It's last year's pitcher. His face so much fuller, and I mean, I think, I know everybody's like Cole, and he was the second, behind Lewis. I think it's going to be a while. I think there's other linebackers are going to that have been through camp, both spring, the summer workouts, here starting the fall. I think they're going to be in there before Cole gets there. I think it could be as long as maybe after. I'm not saying he won't get any time, but it could be like before you start seeing a lot of Cole. It could be past the bye week, going into that BYU game before we see whether he kind of solidifies as a starting, like he was last year and being as productive. I think he's got a lot of catch up time to do. So that's just my personal take. And some of those other guys have been there, and I know he knows the system, but he's got to get in. He's got to get in some more game shape, get some reps in that weight room because you miss all of that during that time. And so, um, yeah, I think a lot of people just kind of anointed him. The three things that I feel like they kind of have going, and some things I have kind of some concerns about. One, I heard Scott put up a ranking of Alonzo Barnett, like he's the 36th best quarterback in the nation, and I don't think necessarily a lot of people in that room believe that. They believe he's a much higher caliber quarterback than he's given credit for, and I think that's going to be fun is watching to see what happens and what transpires there because I think that gave some extra motivation not only for Alonzo but also the teammates around him to prove that. I mean, he made the college football playoff again. Yes, he played James Madison and kind of got that, but he still put him on his back a lot, and I think he's wanting to show that he is a much better quarterback than people are giving credit for. I also uh, the returners and the depth of this team. I like a lot of the returning pieces we have. I feel like we're definitely more deep at some spots than we were last year. Still concerned really across that O and D line. That's more on my concern side. Is the O line got enough after what they found that first group? And I do feel like they have an idea of who their first group is. I think they're just trying to solidify exactly where they want each piece. But I think they have an idea. But the defensive line, I think they have it. They just don't have a lot of depth there. So those are two concerns I have versus the two things. The last thing I'll say, I feel like our schedule plays out really well for us. I think having Pitt sandwiched around two easier games be a good test for us and give us a couple games there where we can work out some things before we get into conference play. And it's going to be a big one. I mean, TCU is no slouch, but we do have them at home. So I think that's a positive. And then I guess one of the biggest concerns I have in the games that we have, yes, the schedule's there, but we got to prove that we can win the close ones. We got to prove that we can win on the road. So I think we have a lot to prove on the that, even though the schedule kind of favors us. So again, I think what I'll do is, like I said, I want to talk about some of the things on FanFest that I went to yesterday. Also, wanting to kind of break down each position. Some of you have asked questions about what I've thought about some things, and it's basically around a lot of the position groups. So I figured I could easily do that in a, I like to do my thing in five, being it's my favorite number. And it kind of leads us into the last thing, which is the big Jaden Daniels controversy because he was number five at LSU, a Heisman winner. Joe Burrow, also a Heisman winner. You don't see him giving out nine. I guess he was upset that they had given a new player number five and feels like, his should be unavailable to anybody on the team. And he has basically reached out and done a cease and desist for LSU to use any of his name, image, and likeness. I don't think he's going to win that in court. I don't think they are obligated in any way to, appease him on the number. I know you can sit here and say you retire numbers, but at the same time, you know, if a university changes their mind and wants to be able to pull it out, and I think the hardest thing is if you have a good player out there, and that's the thing, he wants to come to your university, but he wants to wear a number that you kind of maybe think is not available, it's probably going to become available. I mean, Joe Burrow did great things there, but I mean, if they had a stud of a of a key position that they needed, and he wants to wear nine, and that's what's going to be the breaking, whether he comes to your school. I think you're going to see a lot more of this. I just do. And there's been a lot of opinions out there. I've listened to Michael Irvin about, he doesn't mind that CD Lamb is wearing his 88, because he said if his number was up there and they would just go up to it and show it from time to time and do that. But now he's on there every offensive play because CD is out there, and every time he misses one, it's Michael Irvin wouldn't have missed that one. And every time he brings one in, it's like that's just like Michael Irvin. So his number's actually living on more with it being on the field than it is being up on the rafter and not ever being worn. There's been multiple times. I know when Peyton Manning went to Denver, 18 was a retired number. They contacted the family. Family was very generous of saying, absolutely, we don't mind if we knock it off for somebody like Peyton. Then of course he wore it there, and then it went back up. It's not Peyton's number. Peyton's number is through, the Colts, and so you have those numbers, but again, I just don't think it's something that can always stay. There's some that will, but I feel like the more and more NIL and recruiting and getting these kids here, if they want something and you want them, I think there's going to be a lot of give and take. And I just think, they don't owe the player. I mean, they may do a ceremony and stuff, and maybe this kid will wear it, and they won't have anybody else wear it after that. But I don't know if I can't always know that things are true that you see on the internet, because I would be surprised if they did it. But it looks like Lane had come out and was just like, look, the kid was promised this. It was before me. Brian was recruiting him, and then I came in and we just continued the recruitment. I was told that this was the deal, but supposedly they made all bunch of jersey number 5, and everybody came out in a 5. I don't know if that's necessarily true or if it's AI or was generated somehow, but I mean, that what a slap in the face. But there has been nothing but memes about this. I mean, Jaden's kind of got egg on his face by being a little butthurt about wearing the number 5, and I'm just like, look, man, it just sometimes it's big, it's bigger than you. So I my take on it is one, my favorite number is 5 as well, but uh, I'll actually end on with this story here. And we can all get locked into numbers. And is when I was a sports director for many, many years, my kids, when they played in my program, I ensured that they had the number 5 because it was my favorite number. And so I made sure that Emily, CJ, and Kelly always had a jersey with that size with the number 5. They were given that. I pulled it out and it was always theirs. Um, and so Emily, when she got to high school and started playing volleyball, she actually had 5 as a freshman, and she had 5 as a sophomore, and she had 5 as a junior. And then going into her senior year, getting ready to paint her spot, she was really excited. We came out with everything we were going to do on her spot for her um, senior parking. And she wanted the number 5 there because it meant so much to her, because it was kind of like our connection with her dad, because I've liked 5, and mine's actually from NASCAR racing. When I first kind of got into NASCAR, I liked Terry Labonte. He was number 5. I pretty much kind of stuck with it since then. That was kind of mine. It wasn't my number growing up. I was actually more 9 or 19, but I just kind of had 5, and then it just kind of worked. I had 3 kids, and then now ex-wife, but my wife, I had 5. There was 5 in the family, so just 5 was kind of my number. And her senior year, um, when she tried out for volleyball, she actually lost basically what she thought was going to be a starting position for her. She kind of struggled as a setter, and we tried, but she just kind of struggled. And so she was good at a lot of positions, but not great at any. So she wasn't going to be starting. And so I still feel like seniors should get first pick of numbers. That's what I feel. But I don't coach the team. The coach at the time decided that the starters were going to get to pick their numbers, and one of the starters picked 5, and so she didn't get 5. And she was crushed, and she was upset about it. And I just told her, I said, you know, I was in total agreement. I feel like seniors, but again, it's not my team. And I don't own that number. I mean, I can't go. Yeah, I said, Emily, I'm not going up there and going, hey, uh, my daughter deserves 5. Again, like I said, don't agree with the decision the coach made, but it's not my team. And so as a coach myself, there's been some questions of how I run things or how I discipline or how I do things. And you're going to be that. You're going to be questioned as a coach, and you just have to understand that. And I'm sure there are people sitting on the other side, just like I was with that one, and don't agree. But I had to honor it. That's what that coach wanted. Then that's what it is. The starter gets it. You have to pick another number, and we just have to move on because life is bigger than a number. It hurt. I wanted her to have it senior year. Turned out she was a 2020 graduate, so the end of her senior year was even more horrible with everything canceled with awards and dance and prom and all that. So you just never know, and I just think this proves to me of just how you know it's just life is so much bigger than just some of these small things we get tied up in, including myself. I know at times I get tied up in, and we call sweating the small stuff, but I guess that's what I'm going to leave with on that fifth and final thing is that, again, that's why I pick five things. And there's sometimes I don't do it, but that's what I like to do. And, if it gets down and as I do this show that, it's not really picking up the five, I may have to make some changes. So that's just part of it. And yeah, I really hope that it gets kind of squashed quickly. I think once we get into some more games and some things coming up, and that story will be buried. It'll be on to the next thing. That's one thing I've learned about the news cycle. It'll be something else. I mean, who remembers about Brendan Sorsby after all the mess in the last, just couple of months, how things, the storyline changes all the time. So all right, well, that's my time for this evening. Hopefully, my first part when I didn't have my headphones on, I did put them on in just the nick of time. I did have a notification come through that I heard being here that the microphone didn't pick up because I had my headphones on. So hopefully that will still be okay on my first part. If not, I'll redo it. And thanks a lot for listening. Sorry it's been a week, but hopefully, like I said, I'll get back in the groove of things, especially once season gets underway, because there'll be too much to talk about not to get that weekday in. But busy week for Coach. Get some volleyball tryouts in, and then you guys, I hope to catch you later on in the week. And as always, remember, go Knights, charge on.